At 6:03 local time, a United States Navy destroyer cuts eastward through the Strait of Hormuz at 20 knots. The water is flat, the lights still low, and the ship is running a routine transit through one of the most monitored, contested, and consequential stretches of ocean on the planet. 33 kilometers to the north, a radar dish on the Iranian coastline rotates, pauses, and locks. What happens in the next 4 minutes will never appear in a press release. It will not trend. It will not be briefed to journalists or acknowledged from a podium, but it will settle quietly and permanently a question that every armed actor in this region is always asking. What does it actually cost to shoot at an American warship? Before we dive in, comment where you are watching from and click subscribe. 21 million barrels. Well, that is how much oil moves through this strait every single day. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates. Every barrel they sell to the world must pass through a gap of water 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. There is no pipeline that bypasses it. There is no routing around it. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a choke point. It is the choke point, the one place on the planet where a threat, not even a closure, just a credible and sustained threat, can spike global oil prices overnight, price commercial shipping insurance into the stratosphere, and inject existential anxiety into every government whose economy runs on Gulf crude. Iran has understood this arithmetic for decades. Their military doctrine does not require them to defeat the United States Navy in open battle, where that would be a brief and catastrophic experience for them, and they know it. What the doctrine requires is far more achievable. Make operating here painful enough, expensive enough, uncertain enough that the calculation changes. Make the presence not worth the cost. That strategy is not propaganda or bluster. It is geometry, and they have been engineering toward it, refining it, testing it for 30 years. What they have built is not a conventional fleet. It is something purpose-designed for this specific environment: shallow water, cluttered coastline, short distances from land to shipping lanes that compress warning times to seconds rather than minutes, fast attack boats that can swarm a larger vessel before it can bring its main weapons to bear, naval mines laid in the dark that turn the water itself into a weapon, drone programs that are expanding every year, and anti-ship missiles, some with active radar seekers that home autonomously in their terminal phase, some capable of mid-flight course corrections to defeat intercept solutions, and most of them what analysts call sea-skimming. Think of sea-skimming the way you think of a car running without headlights on a dark highway. The missile drops to just meters above the water surface the moment it launches, flying below the radar horizon of its target until the final seconds of its approach. The water surface itself provides cover. The goal is to give the target as little time as possible to respond, classify the threat, and execute a defense. Against a commercial tanker with no defensive systems, that is a death sentence. Against a U.S. Navy warship running full combat configuration with fully manned systems, it is a fundamentally different problem. On this particular morning, someone on the Iranian side either miscalculated that difference or made a deliberate decision to test it. The destroyer is not operating alone. It is part of a carrier strike group transiting the strait as a deliberate and visible signal. Tensions in the region have been elevated for weeks. There have been incidents of tanker harassment in the Gulf. Diplomatic back channels are strained to near silence. The strike group's presence is itself a message. We are here, we are watching, and we are not going anywhere. The destroyer is at heightened alert. Every radar system is active. The Combat Information Center is fully manned at all stations. This crew has been drilling for exactly this scenario for months, running rehearsals in real sea conditions through the actual geography where the engagement would unfold, because in this region, the line between a rehearsal and an actual engagement is sometimes measured in seconds. Then something changes on the Iranian coastline. The destroyer's electronic warfare suite detects it first, not the missile itself. What it detects is the fire control radar going active. Think of fire control radar the way you think of a laser pointer aimed at a dartboard before a throw. It is not the throw, it is the aim. The moment that a mission is detected and classified, every alarm in the Combat Information Center activates simultaneously. The clock starts there at the moment of the radar lock, not the moment of launch. One of those extra seconds of warning are not accidental. The electronic warfare systems on U.S. surface combatants are specifically engineered to identify and classify radar emissions by their frequency signature and waveform, to distinguish fire control radar from navigation radar, search radar, or commercial emissions, and to do it fast enough to buy the crew decision time before the weapon is even airborne. In missile defense, seconds are not merely valuable, seconds are the entire margin between a successful intercept and a catastrophic hit. The missile launches from a concealed coastal position, it drops to sea-skimming altitude within moments of clearing the launcher and accelerates toward the destroyer, low and fast across the water. The ship's SPY-1 radar, the large phased array panel system that powers the Aegis combat system, yet acquires the track within seconds of launch. Phased array radar operates differently from a conventional rotating dish, where a traditional radar sweeps its beam like a lighthouse, scanning one sector at a time and waiting for the antenna to complete its rotation before revisiting a contact. Phased array steers the beam electronically, nearly instantaneously in any direction without moving any physical hardware. It does not wait for the next rotation cycle. It can track hundreds of contacts simultaneously across the full sphere around the ship. The track is on every screen in the Combat Information Center within moments of launch. Anti-ship missile inbound. Time to impact under 4 minutes. 4 minutes sounds like margin. It is not. In those 4 minutes, the crew must verify the track is a real physical object and not a sensor artifact, a ghost return caused by sea clutter or electronic interference. They must correctly classify the threat, not just that it is a missile, but what type, what flight profile, what likely impact point. They must compute an engagement solution. They must get authorization through the chain of command, and then the weapon system must execute flawlessly on the first attempt. Every one of those steps involves human beings making high-pressure decisions on incomplete information, knowing that both error directions carry serious consequences. Engage a track that resolves as a civilian aircraft, and you have created an international catastrophe and ended careers. Hesitate on a confirmed real missile, and the ship absorbs a hit that can kill dozens of sailors and sink a billion-dollar warship. These are not theoretical failure modes. They have occurred before in other navies, on other waters, under similar pressure. The Aegis combat system is engineered specifically to compress this decision cycle without removing the human being from the final authorization step. It tracks hundreds of contacts simultaneously. It classifies and prioritizes threats automatically based on pre-programmed engagement criteria. It displays the tactical picture in a format designed for fast human comprehension under conditions of maximum cognitive stress. It recommends engagement options and calculates intercept solutions in real time. It does not pull the trigger, but it does everything technologically possible to ensure that the person who does has exactly what they need at the exact moment they need it. The commanding officer reviews the track, the classification, the solution. The order is given. From the forward deck, an SM-2 Standard missile launches in a burst of rocket exhaust, accelerating to supersonic speed within seconds of clearing the rail. The Aegis system guides it via continuous encrypted data link throughout its flight. That guidance link is not a passive tracker, it is an active steering channel. The ship is correcting the interceptor's trajectory in real time as both missiles continue to move, the incoming weapon flying its programmed profile and the interceptor adjusting to compensate because the incoming missile is maneuvering. The modern sea-skimming anti-ship missiles are programmed with terminal phase evasion logic. pre-computed course corrections in the final seconds of flight, designed specifically to defeat a predictive intercept solution by changing where the missile will be when the interceptor arrives. It is not the missile thinking, it is the missile executing behavior that was designed months or years earlier by engineers who knew what an Aegis intercept attempt looks like. The SM-2 accounts for this. It does not aim at where the target is. It leads the target, aiming for where the target will be at the moment of intercept. The intercept happens approximately 2 kilometers from the destroyer's hull. One missile, one intercept. The debris enters the water, the acoustic signature resolves on the ship's sensors, and the destroyer continues its transit without breaking course. From first radar lock detection to confirmed intercept, 4 minutes and a few seconds. Here's where many accounts of engagements like this one close the story. The missile was stopped, the crew is safe, crisis averted. That framing ends the account at the wrong moment and misses the entire strategic dimension of what just happened. And it is the strategic dimension that determines whether such an engagement is ever repeated. If the United States Navy absorbs a missile attack and continues sailing without response, it has transmitted a signal to every armed actor and every government in the region. Shooting at American ships carries no consequence. That signal, once sent, cannot be unsent, not through a statement, not through a later demonstration. The credibility cost of absorbing fire and continuing without response would outlast any single tactical engagement by years. The location of the launch site is already confirmed. The Aegis system recorded the fire control radar's exact frequency, waveform, and emission geometry from the moment it went active. There is no ambiguity, and no ambiguity is possible about where that missile came from. Fighter aircraft from the carrier were already airborne on defensive posture the moment the first alert was declared. They now receive new orders. The strike is authorized. 2 aircraft, precision-guided munitions. The target is the mobile missile launcher that fired the shot. Mobile launchers are among the hardest targets in modern warfare. They move continuously, hide in terrain and vegetation, and disperse after firing before relocating to a new position. A launcher that has not fired is nearly impossible to find from the air, but a launcher that fires reveals its position, its thermal signature, its radar emission, and its location to every sensor in the battle space. This one did not relocate quickly enough after launch. The launcher is destroyed. A second missile system identified by the aircraft during the approach run is taken out in the same strike. The entire retaliatory sequence, from the moment the anti-ship missile launched to the moment the aircraft returned to the carrier, takes less than 20 minutes. Step back from the timeline and consider what this engagement demonstrates structurally, because the layers that receive almost no discussion are the layers that carry the most strategic weight. You know, the technology performed: Aegis, the SM-2, the phased array sensors, the encrypted data links integrating every vessel in the strike group into a single shared operational picture. All of it executed exactly as engineered under real engagement conditions against a real threat, moving at real speed in contested water. These systems represent multiple decades of iterative development, and in aggregate, investments measured in the tens of billions of dollars. When they work under fire in an actual engagement, every hour of engineering, every at-sea test event, every simulated intercept run is validated in the only context that ultimately tells the truth. But the more consequential point is not technical, it is strategic. The cost of firing that missile was immediate, precise, and significant. The Iranian side lost hardware, but they gained nothing. Deterrence is not a posture. It is a demonstrated relationship between action and consequence. It functions only when that relationship is real, visible, swift, and credible. The Navy's response established all 4 of those qualities in under 20 minutes, and then there is the electronic dimension of this engagement, which receives almost no coverage and is arguably more decisive than any of the kinetic actions involved. The fire control radar was detected before the missile launched. The SM-2 was actively steered throughout its flight via encrypted data link. The The launch site was geolocated through signals intelligence in the seconds following ignition. Every critical decision in this engagement, from the first alarm through to the final strike authorization, it was built on a foundation of sensor data and electronic intelligence. The invisible infrastructure, the processors, the electronic warfare receivers, the networks that connect ships, aircraft, and shore facilities into a single coherent operational picture. That is what made every visible outcome possible. The intercept did not begin when the SM-2 left the rail. It began when the radar emission was detected and classified on the Iranian coastline. Everything that followed was a consequence of that first electronic warning. None of this resolves the underlying problem. Iran's strategic calculus has not changed. They retain every reason to contest American naval presence in this region. They have geography on their side, the narrow water, the cluttered coastline, the compressed warning distances that reduce the effectiveness of standoff. And they are not standing still. Longer-range missiles are in development and testing. Drone programs are scaling in both size and sophistication. Tactics are evolving specifically to probe the limits of point defense systems through volume and saturation, firing simultaneous threats from multiple vectors to overwhelm the intercept capacity of any single ship. The United States Navy holds a decisive advantage in any individual engagement, but the broader competition is a sustained contest between an offense that keeps probing for gaps and a defense that must be right every single time. One failure in that equation has consequences that extend far beyond the tactical engagement itself. That asymmetric pressure is the operational reality every strike group commander carries through every transit of this strait. There was no official statement after this engagement. There rarely is. Operational security, diplomatic sensitivity, the careful management of escalation dynamics, the institutional preference for ambiguity in contested spaces. A dozen reasons these incidents never appear on the front page, but they happen more frequently than most people realize. And every time one of them resolves the way this one did, the missile intercepted, the launch site destroyed, the crew unharmed, the carrier continuing its transit on schedule. It represents the return on thousands of training hours, decades of systems investment, and an architecture designed and built specifically for the worst moments it will ever face. The Strait of Hormuz is open right now. Ships are transiting it today. 21 million barrels pressing through 33 kilometers of water toward refineries, ports, heating systems, and the infrastructure of daily life on 5 continents. That number did not change on the morning of this engagement. That is not luck. That is what 4 minutes of work looks like when the people doing it have spent years preparing for exactly this moment.